WMGF HD3 Mount Dora, Orlando. News Radio WFLA Orlando, an iHeart radio station.
Countering critics. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. The White House responding after claims of long wait times for tests for COVID-19.
Many Americans being tested for COVID-19 are reporting waits of a week or more for results. Public health officials warn that could mean people are spreading the disease unknowingly. White House Press Secretary Kelly McEnany says the U.S. leads the world in testing.
There are various different types of tests in this country. Some take longer to process than others, but we have surged testing to the states. We encourage them to use it to their best ability and to process those tests as quickly as possible.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is urging the president to use the Defense Production Act to increase availability of testing and personal protection equipment. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
When lawmakers return to Washington next week, a top priority will likely be a new coronavirus stimulus package. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Americans are still hurting.
It may be hard for them to understand why they're so busy giving 83% of the benefits to the top 1% in our country, that people really do need this money. Baby needs a pair of shoes. This is urgent.
But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has warned the package has to have limits, saying we should tread lightly when it comes to adding to the national debt. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico have agreed to keep their shared borders closed to non-essential traffic until at least late August due to the virus. Acting head of Homeland Security Chad Wolf says
Beyond Reason Radio.
So if you don't follow me on Facebook at all, at Beyond Reason Radio, WFLA Orlando, on my page, Michael Yaffee, you're missing out because it's all kinds of fun. The responses I get when I do a post on some current events. You know, I got the people on my side who are still disagreeing with me, the people who just agree with me as they should. And then the trolls who troll everyone who disagrees with them, and it's just the whole thing.
And the trolls will never agree with you.
No, of course not. Well, if they do, they usually don't admit it.
Yeah.
But they still love me. So you can...
Well, let's take a record count on that. Let's do a survey.
No, I don't want to. So here's an interesting story I want to start with really quick. Republican governor bans counties, cities from forcing citizens to wear masks. Now, it's the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp. He issued an executive order barring city and county officials from mandating face masks. Kemp's executive order also renewed a limit on gatherings of 50 people or more, strongly encouraged people to wear face masks in public, and emphasized measures to be taken by restaurants and providers of essential services to maintain social distancing. But Kemp does not view mask mandates as legally enforceable and is not allowing local actions on the matter to be more restrictive than state orders. Kemp only encourages masks, but also wears one himself in public, but he is not making it a mandate and not allowing local governments to do that. Now, the reason why I am bringing this up is because if you understand the state of Georgia, you understand why the governor is doing this. I just have a personal story here.
All right.
We drove up.
Some insight, huh?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I got some insight to Georgia recently.
Okay.
We drove up to Virginia for my honeymoon. Mm-hmm. On the way back, we stopped in Georgia at a gas station.
Cheap gas.
Okay?
Yep.
The gas station, it was like the only thing at this exit. It was like in the middle of nowhere. I walk in, about half the people are wearing masks, half are not. There are slot machines in the gas station, people playing slot machines. This is just a gas station.
This is off of I-95?
Yeah.
Wow.
And there are people... Open carry. There was a guy in the bathroom not wearing a mask.
You can do that in Georgia.
Open carry with his gun.
Yep.
This is what goes on in that state. It was just interesting to walk through that And you're just like, these guys love their freedom in this state. They love their freedom.
Let me ask you a question. Did you see a Confederate flag anywhere in this establishment?
Maybe. There might have been. They had like it was a very interesting gas station. It wasn't big or anything, a regular gas station, but they had a little area where they sold a bunch of stuff. And yes, they sold the Southern Rebel stuff.
And were they playing Terrorist theme from Gone with the Wind in the background?
I did not hear that. No. Okay. But I mean, they pride in their personal freedoms in that state.
Sure.
And you know what? When I was going through it, I didn't feel threatened because the guy was carrying a gun. I didn't feel uncomfortable because they had slot machines. We make such a big deal out of a lot of this kind of stuff on a daily basis. But really, it's not that big of a deal. When states do it, and it's fine. Who cares? Why do we make such a big deal and having to limit our freedoms all the time? This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We're on until 8 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. Third night in a row.
Wow.
I have done an episode of Beyond Reason.
Does the union know this? Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you like a union rep in there?
I could be.
You just talk. I haven't joined the union yet. Are you going to break my kneecaps leaving until I join this union that you constantly speak of?
Just call me the fat cat, the guy with the cigar and the apartment downtown. And, all kinds of stuff. I understand. Great.
That means part of my paycheck's going to go to you guys forcibly. So, by the way, the voice you hear of the union rep in there is Mr. Tom Benson in the control room. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing just fine. Beautiful night, no rain.
And Beyond Reason Radio, of course.
I did something so stupid yesterday. I can't believe it. Do you have 30 seconds for this?
Go on.
All right.
For that, yes.
So I went out for dinner last night before the 6 o'clock shift starts. Came in, and it was a downpour. I mean, a downpour.
Yeah.
So I parked as close as I could to the door, grabbed my key fob to the car, and ran inside. 3 hours later, when the shift was over, I go out, and guess what? I never shut off the car.
Really?
It was running for 3 hours.
Wow.
It was chilly inside.
So as a push-button start.
Yes, correct.
That is one of the things with a push-button start. That is something that can happen.
Yeah.
But I guess if somebody stole it.
But if the key fob goes away, there's an alarm that goes off inside the car. Well, guess what? I ran out so quickly, I never heard the darn alarm because it was raining like cats and dogs, and I wanted to get in the building here.
Yeah. Wow. So you wasted 3 hours of gasoline. That's basically what you're.
It just went down a little bit. I was surprised it didn't overheat or anything else,
So basically, you just contributed to global warming.
That's me.
That's what you did.
Uh-huh.
Unnecessarily contributed to climate change.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yep. That's me.
So, I want to start. There's a lot of different things we're going to get to on the show. By the way, I said this is the third night in a row. You can catch the podcast of the last two nights on the iHeartRadio app. Go listen to the podcast if you ever missed the live show. I want to get back to this mask debate because I just think it's interesting where this whole wearing a mask thing has led to. I just talked about what happened in Georgia. I posted about this on Facebook. I'm going to tell you some of the reaction. And the reaction really proved my point. A lot of the people reacting didn't realize they were proving my point, but they did. Now, first, what I did is I put up Marco Rubio, or Senator Marco Rubio. I put up his tweet talking about this today. I thought it was interesting. This is what Rubio said. Mask wearing isn't some novel idea they came up with to control us. Surgeons, nurses, and dentists have used them forever to protect patients and themselves. If it doesn't work, what's the harm? And if it has a 10% chance of getting us back to school, sports, and life, why not do it? And I think that's a good point by Rubio. I mean, nothing is going to be 100% effective here. And I think that's what a lot of people don't really understand or don't really think about. Is wearing a mask going to fully prevent the spread of the virus? No. But it could slow it down. It could spread some of it. It could stop some of the spread.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is checking temperatures before you enter a place going to stop every person who has the virus from entering? Probably not. But it could stop a lot of people. So there are things. Is social distancing a foolproof measure to stop the spread of the virus? No. But in putting all of these things together in combination could help slow down the overall spread. It's not going to stop it 100%. And there's some facts on why this is being spread so easily in the U.S., which is really interesting. I'm going to get into later. But this is what I talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday, but I want to read what I put on Facebook because I got a lot of reaction and then talk about the reaction I got. I said, when it comes to the debate over masks, I don't think it's really about the mask itself. The mask mandates are just the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. Think about it. No one alive in America today has ever really had their freedoms taken away like this. Business owners forced to shut down. Students forced to do distance learning. Consumers forced to have everything delivered. Athletes not able to compete or go to the gym. And no way to go out and try to escape all the bad news. There's no entertainment venues you could go out to. Everything was closed. Your social life was closed. Plus, it's all based on fear of something that is invisible to the naked eye. Think about it. The virus is invisible to us, to our naked eye. We can't see it. So that makes this even more crazy. So with all of this in combination, yes, there was going to be pushback. And the mask, I think, was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I continued on here. I said, I'm not anti-mask. Of all the things in the world that could inconvenience you, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But there is a fear that this is all leading to another shutdown. And many are not sure their livelihoods will survive the next one. And people kind of brush this off, but I can't imagine being an owner of a bar right now. Could you imagine what that's like for you during these shutdowns? It's got to be awful. You don't know if your livelihood, your whole life for the past few years, your business is going to survive. I continued on. I said, it's also worth noting that those who are lecturing the public to stay home are not having the same sacrifices. They're not having to make the same sacrifices. Media pundits, scientists, and politicians are not having to give up their paychecks to slow the spread. Plus, celebrities doing videos from their mansions don't always look good. It would be nice for them to show some humility and understanding before they lecture the rest of us. I continued on. I will not deny that some of the pushback is purely political. Many feel this is an all-out attempt to hurt Trump's re-election chances. With all the crazy attacks on Trump and his supporters this year, that doesn't really seem too far-fetched, at least in my opinion. The debate over the response to the virus was inevitable. There are too many unknowns to have all the answers. And of course, there was going to be political divides because those in charge of the response are partisan politicians who have to make decisions on policies. So anytime you have partisan politicians making decisions on policy that really affects your personal life and your personal freedom, of course, you're going to have partisan divides on the issue. It's just the nature of politics. It's the nature of the beast, especially with something like this when there's so many unknowns and things have changed over the past few months so much. But I ended by saying, for now, though, I agree with Rubio, just wear the mask. So my overall point is it's not really about the mask. What's interesting, though, is looking at a lot of the comments, people brought up things that made my point. One person said, sorry, no mask. And let's talk about the accelerated loss of gun rights since the Gun Control Act of 1968. Every one of us has had our Second Amendment rights restricted daily since then. So he's not really talking about why he doesn't want a mask personally. For him, it's a slippery slope argument. For him, it's the bigger picture. It's exactly what I was saying. That to a lot of people, it's the bigger picture. It's not about the mask itself. Another people said, take a look at the people who are working at the testing locations. They are wearing protective suits, N95 masks, face shield, gloves, and more. But hey, we're supposed to believe that the mask your neighbor knitted is good enough and better than nothing, so as long as you're wearing that, you're safe. It's BS, and I refuse to comply with the BS rules. I do not wear a mask. I will not wear a mask. If someone wants to demand I wear one. He said he's going to claim a medical condition. But he ended that hashtag no mask, no fear. But once again, he's not against the mask itself. He's not talking about why he's not going to wear a mask because it hurts his personal life or something. It's the bigger picture. Well, it doesn't work. It's not going to work 100%, so I'm not going to do it. But it's all BS. He believes that it's just all BS and we're just caving into fear. I think it probably wouldn't bother him that much to wear a mask personally. It's not about the mask to a lot of people. Now, I did have some people say that they don't want to because of medical conditions. So I want to point out that doctors say it's very, very rare that a medical condition would prevent you from wearing a mask. Some people have asthma, allergies, breathing issues, something like that. They can still wear a mask, but it might be very uncomfortable. So they suggest try out different types of masks to see which one better fits your condition. But doctors will usually tell you, unless you're getting a lung transplant or something, you can wear a mask and not have your health that much affected. Now, another person said, I see a mask as a further separation of humanity. Whether we see it or not, a mask has a psychological effect on social cohesion. It breeds distrust. It reduces human interaction. It fosters the idea that a person that has done nothing wrong and poses no danger is inherently dangerous without it. Now, that's kind of interesting because it actually does kind of have to do with the mask. But then he says this. He says, remember the scientific elite already admitted they lied to the public when they recommended not to wear a mask. They excused the lie by suggesting it was for our own good. Sorry, that should mitigate the consequences of using that type of tactic. Ooh. And we're doing all of this for an invisible enemy that 99.95% of the country will survive anyway. In Florida, you're still 3 times more likely to die in a car accident. Is everyone afraid of driving? Now, that's a good point, but once again, notice that it's not about the mask. It's about the bigger picture. To them, it's a symbol of fear. Mm-hmm. And I really think that's what the mask debate is all about. It's the bigger picture. They feel like politicians are pushing an agenda for different reasons that limits our freedoms. It's not that the mask itself, it's a big deal. It's a bigger picture. So we're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. We have to talk about Andrew Cuomo once again, who is being praised by some on the left to his response and why that's beyond reason, and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I just want to make another point on the mask thing real quick. We're going to move on from that, but there was another comment on my post that proves my point again. It says, with the reports of false positives from people who didn't even take the test, tests sent in without even being administered, and labs showing 100% positive results, I have very high doubts we can trust anything COVID-related. I have a mask out of respect for when I go to a hospital or some place of business politely asks, but I refuse to wear one just because of someone else's feelings of getting hurt. Heck, I may not like it, but I can wear a mask in Walmart for 30 minutes, but once I get outside, that thing is off. But once again, that shows why he doesn't like the mask. It's not the mask itself. He says he can wear it for 30 minutes. It's just he feels like the bigger picture is he doesn't trust what a lot of the people are telling us, and he feels like the mask is just the tip of the iceberg. It's exactly what I was saying. Now, I want to replay this cut again. I've played this so many times, and I never thought I would do that with a cut like this, but it's our mayor, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer. We interviewed him last week on Good Morning Orlando, and frankly, he said something that makes so much sense. Now, we'll see if he sticks to it, but I keep going back to this because it's true. It's the hard truth, but it's true. Here's what he said.
Being closed, being open, being closed, because we have to learn to coexist with this virus, because I don't see a vaccine coming anytime soon. And Dr. Pino said it pretty well one time. We can't ping pong back and forth between being open, being closed, being open, being closed, because we could do that forever if we don't have a vaccine. We could relax the rules and go to full capacity at restaurants and then be at 1,500 positive tests and have to roll back. So I'm just imploring everybody to do what we can as our civic duty is to protect each other, protect the businesses.
So I agree with him that this idea that we can just ping pong back and forth, open and close, open and close. No, we have to learn to coexist with this virus because it's going to be around, and shutting down only delays the inevitable. And we can't wait for a vaccine, which could be 2 years out. We don't know. There's been some good news in terms of the trials, but we don't know how long that's going to take. And then once it actually works, how long it's going to take to manufacture. But there was an interesting piece in Reason.com that actually kind of talked about this a little bit. It talked about the bars. It says, don't bail out bars, let them reopen. So long as governments view lockdowns as their primary tool for combating COVID-19, they are in effect sentencing bars and other shuttered businesses to a likely death. And that's right. These leaders think that all we can do is just continue shutdowns. And then there's this push he talks about in the article for a bailout program. We got to bail them out then. But that's not going to work. If we continue to shut down these businesses, you can only bail them out for so long. And once they reopen, people are still going to be too afraid to go that the business is still going to fail. It says here, it's possible that even if bars are allowed to reopen, many of them will still fail. Restaurant reservations, a proxy measure for people's willingness to go out, are still down by as much as 60%. This is a feature, not a bug, of lifting lockdowns. Giving businesses the freedom to reopen means we will discover which of them can actually hang on in a world where COVID-19 is an ongoing concern. Letting some of these businesses fail will allow the workers and capital tied up in them to flow to other economic activities that can survive during the pandemic. The alternative proposal of combining continual lockdowns with bailouts will only set the stage for a zombified economy where the still productive sectors of the economy are required to prop up firms that may take years to be profitable again. He's basically saying, let the free market work. Let the free market do its job. People are not going to continue to go to these bars if there's a threat that they could get the virus. But no. The leaders at the top, they don't want freedom. They don't want choices. They don't want the free market to work. They want
power.
Well, yeah, they want power, and they know better, Tom Benson. They know better than you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to continue to do this ping-pong effect back and forth. We're going to prop up already dead businesses, and it's going to have a bad effect on our economy. We'll continue this conversation in just a moment here on Beyond Reason Radio.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Andrew Cuomo is not a COVID hero. Ooh, am I allowed to say that? I'm not so sure. I mean, he's like hailed as the savior of America now or something. I don't know. But that's a title from the editors at the National Review. I think they're exactly right. But they weren't the only ones who criticized Cuomo recently. We played this on the show earlier this week. Jake Tapper of CNN, of all people, actually blasted Cuomo because he put out this poster basically declaring victory and saying it's all because of him and New Yorkers and stuff like that. Here's what Jake Tapper said.
New York's Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo seems to be on something of a victory tour, congratulating the state and himself for defeating the virus, even selling this poster, which shows his state getting over the mountain by bringing down the curve during the 111 days of hell, as the governor put it. The poster includes references to his daughters and a boyfriend, little inside jokes. There are no illustrations, however, of the more than 32,000 dead New Yorkers the highest death toll by far of any state. No rendering on that poster of criticism that Governor Cuomo ignored warnings, no depiction of the study that he could have saved thousands of lives had he and Mayor de Blasio acted sooner. No painting there on the poster of his since rescinded order that nursing homes take all infected patients in.
So Jake Tapper's right, of course, in that post. I don't say that very often, but he is. But Andrew Cuomo fought back against Jake Tapper a little bit, which is interesting. He was on CNN yesterday. It was either yesterday or earlier today, I believe. And here's his first comment about the criticism of, did he declare victory over the virus?
Oh, we're not celebrating at all. That was Mr. Tapper's misconstruction and his own political interpretation, which everyone is allowed. No, not at all. What we're saying is New Yorkers did step up and did flatten the curve. That is a fact. The people of New York unified. The people of New York were disciplined. They helped each other, and they did it. We went from the worst infection rate in the country to the best, to the lowest. That is a fact. Good for New Yorkers. I applaud New Yorkers. I'm proud to applaud New Yorkers.
Now, what was it, 32,000 people died there? How many more thousands?
I think it was 132,000.
No, not that died. Not in New York, but it was 32,000, which is a lot. I think it was a lot more that got infected.
Let me go see Mr. Google here.
Okay. But, I mean, when you look at the curve, basically, he's saying he declared victory. New York did this. That's why the curve went down so sharply. It's their actions. Honestly, it seems like they just reached herd immunity. When you look at the curve, that was the original curve.
You're right, 32,000.
Which is a lot, because we've had 4,000 in Florida. Everyone's saying Florida is the new epicenter. New York had 32,000. We've had a little over 4,000. And they predicted us as much as 8,000 right now. So, I mean, everyone's blaming DeSantis. But when you look at the curve of New York, it's pretty much what the CDC said would happen if we did nothing. There would be this really big curve, and then it would go down because it reaches some kind, most people catch it and reaches some kind of herd immunity. That's basically what happened in New York. But what's really interesting is people like Andrew Cuomo and people on the left and people in the media always complain that Trump never takes responsibility, right? Never takes responsibility for his failures. He just always makes excuses, always blames somebody else. And frankly, I agree with that criticism. Trump a lot of times does not take responsibility. That's his approach. He fights back. And I guess it's a New York thing, though. A lot of people tell me that, oh, he's a New York street fighter or whatever. Because Andrew Cuomo seems to never take responsibility either. Instead of looking at his failures or the failures of his state, he blames President Trump. Of course, it was all Trump's fault. Here's what he said.
No, Tapper's point, as you just heard from the CDC report, Tapper should say that Trump is to blame for the virus coming to New York, because that's the fact. That's what the CDC just said. If Trump's government had done its job, the virus wouldn't come here. Governors don't do global pandemics. I was trying to explain that to Mr. Tapper. State governments don't do global public health. Right. That's not in the state charter. The federal government does that. The virus didn't come here because of anything New Yorkers did. The virus came here because the federal government missed it. That's what the CDC, the federal government, says today.
So there you go. It's Trump's fault, of course. Makes excuse. I mean, other than Trump, I've never seen a guy never take responsibility. He always does this. Always. Now, the National Review, as I said, the editors had a good article. Andrew Cuomo is not a COVID hero. It says the media have decided to play along with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's bizarre effort to reinvent himself as the hero of the fight against COVID-19. Cuomo's motivation is transparent enough, and we are duly impressed at the chutzpah required to even attempt such a thing, but there's no excuse for anyone else enabling him. You would never know from listening to Cuomo's glowing press notices, with honorable exception of CNN's Jake Tapper that we just played, that more than 32,000 New Yorkers have died from the coronavirus, over twice as many people in any other state. Brooklyn and Queens each lost more than 5,500 people, compared with 4,521 thus far for the entire state of Florida. On a per capita basis, New York's COVID-19 death rate has been a third higher than any nation on earth and higher than that of any state besides neighboring New Jersey. Italy, an early epicenter of the pandemic, lost 561 people per million. New York lost 1,667 people per million. This is not just a random occurrence. It continues on here. New York's authorities were reassuring the public to go on as normal until well past the point where the coronavirus had spread pervasively throughout the community. They had let languish the city and state stockpiles of emergency equipment. Most disastrously, Cuomo and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy both ordered nursing homes to take back patients who tested positive for the virus, unleashing catastrophic death tolls in both states' nursing homes populations. It says Cuomo's claim for success is that the state's infection, hospitalization, and death rates have come down, which is rather like if New Orleans had celebrated the water level coming down after Katrina. And just this week, it was reported that infection rates are rising again among young adults and in affluent neighborhoods. Oh, it's happening in New York again? Shh, you can't mention that. No. New York may not be entirely out of the woods. The world's not entirely out of the woods. As more testing's being done across the world, we're seeing case rates go back up. It's happening even in countries like Japan and Australia. We do not suggest that Cuomo alone is responsible, it continues on. There's plenty of blame to go around in hindsight. China, the WHO, and authorities in Europe all bear responsibility for the virus entering New York. The CDC, FDA, and the president all made mistakes. Even with New York, Cuomo's job has not been made easier by the ineptitude and recklessness of Mayor de Blasio and the New York City Council, nor by Cuomo's own toxic relationship with de Blasio. Still, the nursing home decision was the single costliest and most preventable error made by anyone in American government, one that other governors avoided, notably Ron DeSantis in Florida. It says Cuomo has performed well in televised briefings, but there is more to governance than being good on TV. Oh, there is? Jeez, you wouldn't think so half the time. The media effort to rehabilitate him clearly has more to do with setting him as a foil to Donald Trump and a supposedly favorable contrast to DeSantis, who is now dealing with a big surge of confirmed cases in Florida. Even if you strongly disapprove of how Trump or DeSantis have handled the crisis, there's no case for Cuomo as a COVID hero. So I thought that was a pretty interesting take on that as well. I did want to go over another fact here, and I have to pull it up. But apparently, Jim Garrity has been really great also from the National Review at doing some investigative journalism when it comes to the virus. Probably better than I've seen anywhere else, honestly. He has an article about the 4 assumptions about the coronavirus, and one thing he said interested me a lot. He said the most common strain of SARS-CoV-2, which is our coronavirus, the most common strain of the virus in the United States right now is extremely contagious and will prove difficult to contain even with wider and more consistent adoption of best practices. Now, this is something I pointed out, that there's just a lot of this we can't control. When you look at the case numbers going up, it's happening in states that shut down for long times and states that reopened sooner. It's also not happening in states that open more in the north. It seems to be happening in the south. There could be a reason for that. There could be several reasons for that. Sometimes these things are beyond our control. He talked about it, though. He says a study released last month by the Scripps Research Institute concluded that the strain of the virus spreading so quickly in Europe and the U.S. have a mutated S spike protein that makes them about 10 times as infectious as the strain that was initially identified in Asia. If it seems like the United States is having a tougher time controlling the spread of the coronavirus than Asian countries did in winter and early spring, that's partially because this version of the virus is tougher to stop from spreading. So I see a lot of liberals out there on my social media talk about how some other countries like South Korea controlled this better. Well, that's one reason why. Because it's a different strain of the virus. The one here is more contagious. Of course, they don't want to mention that. They just want to blame President Trump, of course. More and more researchers are contending as well that the virus is airborne, meaning that it's not merely being dispersed by the bodily fluids of those who have it, but also floating about in aerosolized form. It's also possible that the virus is not truly aerosolized, but that it is floating in tiny droplets, which are so small and so light that they can easily be carried long distances by air currents. The scale and complexity of the problem should not be understated. The country enacted unprecedented, sweeping lockdowns that kept most Americans at home at great cost to the economy. These lockdowns slowed the spread of the virus but did not stopping it. Preventing more infections is not just a matter of convincing the president to wear a mask consistently or shutting down beaches or subways or requiring quarantines for those who travel between states. At every level of government, the response to the virus has met with mixed success. But it's important to recognize that no one is ignoring any simple or easy solutions because such solutions don't exist. At this point, there is no method of completely halting the virus's spread. Of course there's not. That's why shutdowns were such a problem. Because it slowed it for a time, but it delayed the inevitable. And eventually it was going to spread again because you couldn't keep the economy shut down forever. And even if it was shut down longer, it still would have just delayed the inevitable and spread more just a few months out. We can't go through this again. We have to talk about some other topics coming up next, some other Beyond Reason topics on this edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, the place where we talk about everything that's not controversial at all. No, just the simple topics that make everyone laugh and be jolly good to each other. No, for some reason, I decided to talk about faith, culture, and politics. Welcome back to Beyond Reason Radio. I have to talk about, this has been all over conservative media today, but I have to talk about it as well because you need a voice of reason on it. You do. The National Museum of African American History and Culture put out this flyer, and it talks about aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Now, remember when I talked about how what the left is doing is instead of debating in the marketplace of ideas, a lot of them are just saying that if you believe in normal conservative things like limited government, individual rights, rugged individualism, family values, faith in God, that they're just going to label you as radical and racist over and over and over and over again until it sticks. That's what they're doing. Instead, they're not going to debate you on it anymore. They're just going to put that label on you, and the label will stick enough in the popular culture where you're just put out of the culture. You're canceled, so to speak. Maybe not forcibly canceled, but you'll just be a cultural pariah. They think that they repeat this over and over. This is a great example of that. Because what they're talking about here isn't white culture. It's conservative values in a lot of cases. It says in this little flyer, white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. But here's some of the white culture aspects, right? Now, these things, like I said, they're not about race. It's not about your race that makes these things valuable, but that's what they're going to make it out to be, that it's really just racist if you believe in these things. So the first thing is rugged individualism. It's just a part of white culture. It's not just a good value and principle in general. Oh, no. It's just because you're white. It says the individual is the primary unit, self-reliance, independence, and autonomy highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserved. Okay? These are all things that everyone should promote because they're good. They help make a successful society and successful people. But they're going to now put it in this bubble of white conservatism, and the goal is to make it fringe because the goal is collectivism. Mm-hmm. In order to promote collectivism, they have to do stuff like this. The other thing, a part of white culture, is the family structure. Yes, the nuclear family, father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Husband is breadwinner and head of the household. What's so funny is family structure is very important in the black community as well. It's vital to the black community. In some ways, more vital than a lot of whites in this country. But no, it's just white culture, you see. Mm-hmm. Emphasis on the scientific method. Emphasis on the scientific method is a part of white culture? No, I thought we were just told to believe in science because it's science. But now, when you emphasize science, you're really a part of the white culture. Maybe I'll counter the progressives with that. Why are you so, when they say just believe the science, why are you so racist? It's just believing the science is part of white culture. History. Oh, that's another aspect. Protestant work ethic. Oh, you thought that they were just going after white people in general. No. The collectivists will go after Christianity. And a lot of blacks will be caught up in that because a lot of blacks are Christian in this country. It also says that here religion, that's a part of white culture. Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation from single God concept. Future orientation is a part of white culture. A lot of this is just good advice for individuals to be successful. The greatness of America is not beyond white culture. It's not about collectivist culture at all. It's about individual liberty and individual rights. Plan for your future, delayed gratification. Progress is always best. Tomorrow will be better. Future orientation sounds like good advice if you want to be successful, but no, that's just part of white culture. Holidays are based on Christian religions, based on white history and male leaders. Competition. Now they want to get rid of that because, of course, that applies to free market system is really what it is.
Right. Everybody gets a trophy.
And when there's competition, Tom, there are also losers. We can't have losers. No, not in our collectivist Marxist utopia. Competition, be number one, win at all costs, winner-loser dichotomy, action orientation, master and control nature, must always do something about the situation, aggressiveness and extroversion, decision-making majority roles when whites have power. Now, Matt Walsh actually made a really good point on his Twitter. He said, we've been told for years that white people don't have a culture. But now, suddenly, we do have a culture because all this is being decided for us, apparently, and we're supposed to just go along for the ride. Exactly right. It should be about the individual. But they can't get past identity politics. An example of that is someone who was on The View this week and said, we have to have Joe Biden do that. And Whoopi Goldberg countered it. Go ahead and play that real quick.
Saying give something back because it seems like when black people vote out of fear, it's okay for every other constituency group to make demands. It's okay for evangelicals to make demands. It's okay for the gun lobby to make demands. It's okay for single issue voters to make demands. But when it comes to a black voting base, it's fear. It's like, don't make too many asks. We can't ask them to pick a black woman. And it's not how black are you. It's how black are your policies. Are you willing to adopt a comprehensive agenda that addresses issues relevant to the black community? Do you have someone who can go into these communities and connect with them on an intimate level and relate to the struggle that they have when we disproportionately uphold this country, this party, and this democracy? So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, yes, you have well-qualified women who are just as qualified as Senator Tammy Duckworth. Why not pick somebody who speaks to the base that upholds you, your candidacy, and this country? I don't know why that's a bad thing.
Because no, it's not a bad thing, but what it kind of sounds like is take care of us as opposed to, listen, we know you're coming and you got to take care of everybody because we're sitting in a bunch of dookie right now. So I just want to make sure that the right people, whoever they happen to be, whoever they are, I want them to have the same opportunity.
Okay, stop right there. I mean, she's basically talking about having the right individual in the places of power, the same opportunity. That's what we should all strive for, but we don't because it's about collectivism now. So I appreciate you listening to the show. I guess we're just frankly out of time. But if you miss any of the show and catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, and I'll catch you guys next time.